Before we start, I want to say thank you to Surfshark VPN for sponsoring today's video. Back when I was in high school, trying to use the internet was a pain. Every social media I liked to go on was blocked. All the reference sites I used such as Pinterest and Twitter were blocked. Hell, even websites teachers wanted us to go on were usually blocked. Everything was blocked. I couldn't even use my cellular data either because the school walls were made of cement, which really screws up everything. Every day in school, I had to suffer until the day was over to check on how my Instagram was growing at the time. Until Surfshark VPN saved my life. Surfshark was able to bypass all the restrictions the school had on their websites, and I was finally able to access the websites I was blocked from. Even better, Surfshark VPN protected my data with uncrackable encryption. So school administrators couldn't even read who was bypassing the restrictions. I was basically an anonymous user using their Wi-Fi. This didn't only work for phones, however. Surfshark is for PC, Mac, Chrome, and even Xbox and PlayStation. If you have this problem in school, I 100% recommend Surfshark. Even if it doesn't work out for you, they're offering a 30-day money-back guarantee, so don't even hesitate to try it out. Get Surfshark VPN in my description below, and make sure to use the promo code SubnormalArtist for 83% off and 3 extra months for free. Hey, it's me, your favorite artist you're obviously subscribed to, and welcome to the reference tutorial. In this video, I'm going to be explaining how you can use references efficiently to improve your art. It's one thing to simply attempt to copy the art you're referencing, and it's another to understand the concepts behind what the artist is doing. Being able to understand will help you dramatically, as it will allow you to mold the reference art piece to fit your art perfectly, and I will explain that later. References are the key aspect to improving an art, and they're mostly how I improved as well. Do not let anyone tell you that references are cheating or that they make you a bad artist. No artist can draw anything straight from memory. Painters have to visually see what they are drawing in order to replicate it. In my artwork, I use a bunch of references, and at the end of the day, it helps my artwork look better and unique, and it helps me learn. Anyone who tells you otherwise has an ego problem, and you probably shouldn't listen to them. Here are some tips I gathered on how to efficiently use references to your benefit. First of all, you gotta use different references to make a new unique drawing, and make sure the references are meaningful to the style that you want to achieve. What I mean by this is that you need to reference different artists instead of just one that you really love. If you don't, what this does is it makes your art style basically just a watered down version of your favorite artist, which is not very good. You won't be a unique artist or have a big following, since why would people follow you when they could just follow the guy who does a better job than you? So yeah, make sure that you have a bunch of artists that help you develop your art style. Like for example, I'm going to use this artist because I love their eyes. I'm going to use this one because I like the way they shade clothes. And I like this one because I like the way they draw arms, poses, composition, whatever. You got to make sure that you're getting different artists that you can jumble into one art style that looks unique to what you want. And this kind of leads us to our next point. Identify why you are using the reference. Be sure that you're not losing focus and make sure that you understand why you are using your reference. It could be as specific as the way they do subscattering. Just make sure you know why you're using it. If you don't, you'll end up taking more than you need and you might accidentally be copying instead of referencing, so be careful. Some stuff that you can take from references can be stuff like poses, color schemes, lighting, composition, and the way they draw limbs, faces, eyes. Yeah, you get the idea. Lastly, don't draw what you see, but understand what the artist is doing to achieve that effect. This will allow you to learn and replicate what you are trying to reference. Like I said before, it's one thing to simply attempt to copy the artist's art, and it's another to understand the concepts behind what an artist is doing. It's important that you don't copy your reference, instead mold the reference to fit your drawing so your art doesn't look like a bunch of jumbled shit. You may be asking yourself, but I don't know how to do what the artist is doing, how do you expect me to mold it into my art? Simple. With your previous art knowledge, you're going to break down the art into simple elements and try to replicate it that way. Now, of course, this takes experience, but as you get better, you'll be able to understand more stuff about what other artists do. I will show you an example on how I break down a reference in order to mold it to my art. So as you probably know by now, I'm not very good at drawing objects, let alone liquids. So I needed to reference like coffee spilling because I don't know how to draw coffee. So as you can see here, I had to reference it. You might not think it looks good, but it's my first time doing it, so obviously it's not going to look good. But I'm going to tell you right now how I broke down this picture of coffee to mold into my art. So you may have heard this thing in high school called the elements of design. And this is actually very important to understanding how what a reference looks like. The 7 elements, line, shape, form, color, texture, space, value, are very important, and you need to understand how each of them work. in order to break down a reference piece. Now, I'm not going to show you what each of them are specifically, but I am going to like kind of summarize it. So number one, line. Line is usually like outlines and stuff, you know, pretty simple. Now, it may not look like there's a lot of line here, but if you look closely, the edges of the coffee spelling are almost look like an outline because they're more dark and more like kind of blobby than the middle part, where the middle part just kind of looks like stretched colors. The outer lines actually look like blobby outline. So we're going to take that into consideration. Secondly, shape. Shape is 2D, okay? Form and shape are two different things. I'm going to explain that later, but right now shape is thinking about the 2D image. So as you can see, I'm going to go back to the outline. The outline looks almost blobby-like blobby, you know. I'm just going to use dumb terms so you can understand me better. So I can understand that the shape is kind of like organic. It's like a blobby organic shape. Over here, these shapes in the middle are like stringy, liney almost. I got to take that into consideration. And down here, it's more like LSD trippiness. It's like those kinds of shapes. Have you ever seen like LSD pictures? It kind of looks like that in the middle here. Down here, it kind of looks like a cylinder, but at the top of the cylinder, it's kind of like wavy and then more blobs coming out. So once again, we're going to take that into consideration. Form, on the other hand, is 3D. So as 2D is like circle, square, form is like cube and sphere. So the form, I'm going to go back to the outline. The form of these, the outline, it's going to be spherical. Because as you can see, there's like a little bit of brightness inside the blob while it's darker on the outside. And that kind of like, you know, infers that it's a sphere. As you can see here, this droplet is a sphere. And all these things, all the outline are like kind of spherical shape or spherical form. As the shape is blobby, the form is going to be more spherical. Now in the middle parts, you're not really gonna take form that much because like when you spill coffee, it's kind of like a plane. So it's gonna be like these, you're gonna pay attention more to shape. Like in the insides of like the outline, it's more shape than form. Now on to color. Color is very, very important. What you need to understand, you need to like pay attention to the hue, the value, the saturation, the temperature, all that stuff. So yeah, when you're looking at an art piece, you need to make sure you gotta pay attention to the saturation, the value, the hue. So let's do that. Now on the outline, you can see that it's like a very, very dark brown, almost black, but in the middle, it's a very saturated red with some orange around at the top. Very dark brown, very saturated red in like the middle parts. Inside the outline, quote unquote, it's kind of more light. It kind of looks like more like a caramel. So as you can see, there's white here. There's some orange. There is some spots of black and white here. Down here, ooh, very yellowy orange. It's mostly orange and yellow and kind of medium brown. On to texture. Texture is how you want to make like how it looks to you. You need to make sure you kind of copy like how rough, soft, rubbery, whatever. So as you can see, the texture right here looks mostly rubbery. Kind of funny, but it kind of looks rubbery. And so I kind of got to take that into consideration. Mostly all the coffee just kind of looks rubbery. So yeah. Space, I don't know. I don't really know how space works. So I'm not going to pay attention to that. And value, there is a lot of variation in value. So yeah. It's mostly these 5 you pay attention to. I don't know about these 2. You probably can, but like I don't understand it that well. So how do I take what I just said and convert it into art? Now, first of all, what I'm going to do is what I first did is draw the outline as like you would in an actual drawing. You draw the outline first. So as you can see here, I'm going to take, hold up. I'm not going to replicate it again because it took me a long time to fucking draw this coffee. So I'm just going to kind of tell you what I did. So as you can see, I took a very dark brown, almost the same dark brown as this, and I kind of drew blobs like this. because as you can see, it's very blobby on the outline. That's the shape of it. Very blobby lines. And that's pretty much what I did. I did that for the outline, and then all I did was add a base color, which is probably this color. I added that as a base color. So yeah, that's the line. The shape, 2D, same thing. It's just blobby for the outline. But for these middle parts, what I did is I ended up taking like a hairbrush that looked like this. And then as you can see up here, the shape of over here is kind of stringy. As you can see, like it's like a bunch of lines just kind of following the movement of the coffee. And that's what I tried to replicate with this hairbrush. I tried to make a bunch of white. Well, I added white first, and then this is kind of like a stretching tool that stretches hair. And I kind of made it so then it looks like a bunch of lines following the movement of the coffee. And as you can see down here, I try to copy the LSD shape, like the blobs. I don't know how to really say it. It's not like the same as these blobs, but you can understand. It's like kind of like trippy looking. I try to copy that shape, and as you can see here, this was my attempt at doing it. Now, this is better at doing it on Photoshop because Photoshop kind of has like the liquidate tool, and that would have been probably perfect for this, but CSP doesn't have that, so I kind of had to just like, you know, draw the different shapes. And over here, just a bunch of blobs because it's like spilling out. Bunch of blobs. And I'm going to go through color first because to achieve form, I kind of needed to pay attention to the color. So over here, you can tell that once again, the outlines are dark blue while the middle is very saturated. So what I kind of did first is that I did a light saturation first, and then I went ahead and did a normal layer, and then I got the really bright red and kind of put it to where it would be the most brightest. So in these places right here. I should put more orange up here, but I didn't. I don't know why. But up here, it should be more orange. But as you can see in the middle of all these blobs, I did red. And down here, you can see too, I did the same thing where you put red down here and orange. As you can see, it kind of gives it, onto our next thing, it gives it form. So now, as you can see, it kind of, these blobs kind of feel like sphericals now because of the color that we gave it. Now it feels like there's an inside, and there's a dark outline, and they feel more like blobs or spheres instead of just a plain 2D shape. Same for these little blobs right here. You can see that I gave them form by making them 3D, by making them brighter on the inside and darker on the outside. Dark outline, brighter inside. Also, to give it form, I also added these highlights right here so it looks more droplet-like. Because you know how water droplets like give a lot of highlights? That you can also use like highlights to give form to show that they're like reflecting a lot of light. You know how sphere highlights work. You know how they work. So the highlights were made to make them look more spherical. Also, texture. The highlights are also good for texture because it makes it look more shiny, more rubbery, and like all that stuff. Down here, I could give this more of a rubbery feel by liquefying it once again with like the Photoshop tool, but I can't do that because I'm using Clip Studio Paint, which kind of sucks, but yeah. So as you can see, that's how I broke down a picture of coffee. I looked at the line, the shape, the form, the colors, the texture, the value, all that stuff. I would recommend studying a lot more of the principles of design if you want to be able to have like an artistic eye. So yeah, train your artistic eye, look at the principles of design, and you're good. Now I can't really show you how to reference every single thing in art, so I'm just going to do one more specific example. Now imagine you had a drawing, but you don't know how to color the hair. And you stumble upon the MapleStory 2 artist and you really like the way they do hair. How would you break it down in order to mold it to your art? So to make this segment short and to get the point across, I'm only going to color the bangs. So the first thing you obviously need is color, because to color you need a color palette. So we need to identify which colors we need to use to color the hair correctly. So first of all, what I'm going to do is pick a base color, and it's pretty obvious. It's like in the upper half of the bangs, it's this light turquoise. Now for my second shading color, this is where it kind of gets confusing because as we can see in the bottom half of the bangs, everything is dark. And that is because the artist uses a multiply layer. Now once you become kind of intermediate at art, you can pretty much tell when an artist is using a multiply layer. And in this case, I can tell. So I'm going to go with the standard light blue color for the multiply layer color. It's a common color to pick when you try to use a multiply layer. Everyone just goes light blue. Now for the second and third shading color, I'm going to pick two darker colors that are not in the area where the multiply layer is. After we get our color palette, now we can move on to the shape and form of the hair. Trying to kind of inspect how this artist gives form to the hair, I noticed that it kind of looks like a bevel and emboss. If you don't know what bevel and emboss is, I'll explain it right now. There's this thing in Photoshop called bevel and emboss where you can give more depth to your image by adding a highlight and shadow to opposite sides of the image. You can tell that's what the artist is kind of going for because you can see there are shadows on the edges of the hair and highlights also on the edges of the hair. So I'm going to color my hair as if it were a bevel and emboss to replicate the feeling of the artist's hair. Next, we're going to apply the multiply layer. As I pointed out before, the bottom half of the bangs on the character are darker than the top half. This is to convey form. The artist makes the bottom half darker to show that the hair is curved and that the bottom half of the hair is bending inward. In other words, we're basically trying to make the hair seem more 3D-ish. Then I'm going to blur the edge of the multiply layer as the original artist did to convey texture. The hair is supposed to be soft, so the edges of the shadow will be soft as well. Next, we're going to erase the edges of the multiply layer in strokes to convey highlights. We are also going to do this in places where I added extra lines of shadow in the bangs. As you can see on the original photo, the artist did this as well. This is to add a sense of more strands of hair instead of just blocks of it. Lastly, with the highlight shape, it was pretty easy. All you really need to do is scribble with the flow of the hair and then take a transparent brush and then just kind of erase the highlights so it creates multiple like U shapes. And that's it. We just referenced the hair coloring of the MapleStory 2 artist to add to our art style. And that's the end of this video. Once again, please look up more stuff about the principles of art so you can train your art eye better and to understand more about the techniques of artists. It's impossible for me to show you how I reference every single element of art, but I just wanted to show you on how you can get started on practicing it. Thank you so much for subscribing and viewing this video, and I will see you next time. Peace.